Guys. This week I'm going to walk you through how to write a position paper in social studies. Now, if we were in regular class, this would be the written component to your unit final. Now, we are wrapping up Unit 2, and I will be using this assignment as a way to determine your understanding since we began this online learning. Meaning, here's an opportunity for you to raise your mark if you are able to demonstrate understanding. Okay? I will be walking you through this assignment and giving you a planning guide as well as giving you some examples of different levels as to how to get a satisfactory or what would be an excellent example of a response. Okay, so although we are not doing the multiple choice test, I do want to do this assignment with you as it is something that you will have to do in grade 11, in grade 12, and it will be part of your diploma exam at the end of grade 12. So here's the assignment. So it is a position paper, and I will be asking you to write a response in which you must interpret these three sources and answer the question, what do each of the sources presented communicate about the legacy of imperialism in Canada? Now, imperialism has been the idea that we've been focusing on throughout the unit, and imperialism is just basically the idea of one nation overtaking another nation. Now, there will be three sources that I am going to ask you to analyze in this assignment. And your task is to write a 4-paragraph essay format response. Now, some of the sources you can find in the textbook, and for some of them, you may have to do a little bit of external research, like on this one, for example. So here, the first source is it's a picture of a Canadian soldier and an armed First Nations protester in a confrontation at the Kanesaki Reserve in Oka, Quebec, September 1st, 1990. Um, Now, this situation happened because members of the reserve wanted to protect their land, their sacred land, because the government wanted to put a golf course on their land. So this is a very rich example of the impact of imperialism. Now, I have also attached a link to a 6-minute video that will walk you through this confrontation and what happened in those 3 months back in 1990. The second source, here we have Thomas Moore before and after his entrance into the Regina Indian Residential School in Saskatchewan in 1874. So here you can see prominent differences between what he looked like, what he was like prior to imperialism and residential schools. And your third source is you analyzing a graph, and this is the 2012 suicide rates in Canada. And you will have to just look at what these lines represent and what do they mean and the differences they are between them. Now, the last thing you are going to do is create a personal response to this question. What do each of the sources presented communicate about the legacy of imperialism in Canada? That is the first 3 paragraphs. So you will look at each source and answer that question. For your fourth paragraph, considering the sources, what do you think should be a fair and just response to the legacies of historical imperialism in Canada? Okay, so to clarify, the fourth paragraph is a personal response. So here you would talk about how do you believe the government should preserve historical legacies. Okay? Because it is a personal response, there are no right or wrong answers. However, to score high, you need to use social studies vocabulary, information from the textbook, knowledge from videos that we have watched. Now, here are some examples of what to remember when you are writing that paragraph. So, write a response in which you must interpret each source to identify what ideas are presented in each source about the legacy of imperialism. Explain and defend your position on the legacy of imperialism, and then support your response by referring to the sources and your understanding of social studies. Okay. Also, reminders for writing: organize your response and proofread your response. Okay. So I have attached a planning guide here for you. Okay. So for the first question, where you are analyzing the three sources, okay? So you can use this or not. It will help you in terms of creating your response. So for each source, describe the source. What do you see? What is the situation? Is there exaggeration, humor, satire, analogy, irony? Is there a metaphor, stereotype? Are there any symbolism, significance of literature of devices? Okay. Source implications. What is the legacy of historical globalization being shown? Use at least one term to improve your discussion. And then evidence. Use at least one case study example for support. Your second question, this is your personal response. Okay. Take a position. What is a fair response to the legacies of historical globalization? Consider the three sources and whether the effects were mostly positive or negative. Connect to sources. What elements of each source will you use to support your position? Okay, use at least one term to improve your discussion. And again, evidence, use at least one case study example for your support. Here's the rubric I will be using to give you feedback. And so although this will not count against you, I will be providing you feedback so that you do learn how to do these so that you are better prepared for next year. Okay, so you will get a mark for the interpretation of the sources. You will get a mark for defending your position. And as always, a communication mark in terms of your organization, your spelling, grammar, and so on. Now, I have attached this as a link for you to go over, but here are some examples of how to respond and what would be a satisfactory as opposed to an excellent. So here the source is a political cartoon. Okay, what does the source communicate about the role of assimilation in imperialism? Okay, now assimilation, as you recall, is one culture, or when someone from one nation moves into another nation and their culture slowly starts to dissolve into the majority of culture. Okay, and so here we see symbolism, right? We see the top hat, which represents the UK. We see Uncle Sam, which represents the United States. In the rocks they're climbing, we have words like oppression, ignorance, superstition, and they're all going up towards they're climbing to civilization. Okay, so in this here, they would have been given brainstorming ideas. Now here's an example of a satisfactory response. The picture shows two men carrying people up a mountain. The buckets look heavy, and one bucket is full of indigenous people. The rocks have words on them such as oppression, superstition, and ignorance, and this means that the people are overcoming these things. The photograph connects to assimilation because the white men want to assimilate the indigenous people, like the church did to Aboriginal people in Canada through residential schools. Okay? So that would be a satisfactory response. Now, here's an example of an excellent. Okay, the source, a cartoon drawing entitled White Man's Burden, is an illustration related to the Rudyard Kipling poem of the same name. The cartoon features a man who is dressed like Uncle Sam, a symbol of the United States, and an unidentified white man in a top hat, though one can infer he probably represents Britain, as the British Empire extended throughout the world. Both men are carrying buckets of stereotype representations of the nations they are colonizing, with the drawings looking purposefully barbaric. This demonstrates the Eurocentric view of imperialism and the men carrying the buckets over rocks labeled oppression, brutality, barbarism, among others, leading towards civilization. The Eurocentric view shown here relates to assimilation, as imperialist countries believed it was their duty to change the language, culture, and religion of indigenous people to make them more European. An example of this was in Canada, where the new Jesuits of France worked tirelessly to convert First Nations and Inuit to Christianity, even changing their names. The Indian Act of 1876 was an initiative led by the mostly British-born Canadian government to control and assimilate First Nations and get rid of the Indian problem. So as you can see, this one has examples, specific examples from the course. It has social studies related words, right? Terminology, which I have highlighted here in red. Okay. So what I have done is I have put this up for you to look at. You will have the assignment. I have posted a video of the Oka crisis, and I'm putting 2 videos as a review for the entire unit in terms of imperialism and the impact that it has had. Okay, please create a Word document to create your assignment and then drop it into the assignment Dropbox into D2L. Okay, thank you.